Good afternoon. Let me do a kind of a housekeeping thing, kind of. So as a business school, we do not endorse institutions or individuals who come in front of us. You will, in the course of this year, see many people who have different opinions from yours. So I'm going to deviate because I just made a true statement. This is my endorsement. I've been privileged to get to know Dominic over the last 7 or 8 years. He is a model of everything I hope that you will be in time. He's smart. He's an excellent business person. He's perhaps the most principled person I know, and he's a gentleman. So this morning I found myself in a very complicated meeting, and I knew that Dominic was coming later in the morning. And I literally did ask myself, what would Dominic do? So let me formally introduce him. You're welcoming back to Oxford Dominic Barton. You know Dominic as the Global Managing Partner Emeritus of McKinsey, a role that he held for 9 years prior to just this summer. As the Global Managing Partner, he oversaw, the number that I saw is about 14,000 consultants, but it's probably far more than that. And while McKinsey has a storied reputation, Dom had to take over the firm in the midst of a crisis, the Galleon crisis, and manage it through some tough headwinds in the global economy. In addition to being the leader at McKinsey, he's also an unparalleled thought leader, written 4 books, 80 articles, and a new monograph that I'm going to talk to you guys about called In the Arena. You may know that Dom, like you all, is a student here at Oxford, a Rhodes Scholar. You may also know that he served on our board at the school. You may also know that he's on the Global Leadership Council. And if you were a really careful reader, you'd realize that he is the newest visiting professor at Said Business School.
Thank you.
So we're thrilled to have Dominic. How many of you have ever heard the Teddy Roosevelt speech about In the Arena? Anybody? A few of you. So Dom's new book is called In the Arena, or Monograph. And I just want to give the quote from the Roosevelt speech and then use that as a jumping off point. So this is Teddy Roosevelt speaking in 1910. It is not the critic who counts, not the man who points out how the strong man stumbles or the doer of deeds could have done better. The credit belongs to the man who is actually in the arena, who strives valiantly, who errs, who comes short again and again, because there is no effort without error and shortcoming, but who does actually strive to do the deeds, who spends himself in a worthy cause. Now that was somewhat gendered, coming back from 2010. Men or women can be in the arena, but what Dom's newest monograph is about is being in the arena, being a leader. And so what I'd like to do is spend about 25 minutes in conversation with Dom, but then turn it over to you. Your homework in the next, you should be listening pretty carefully, is to come up with the questions for the kind of the second half of our time together. Fair? Okay, so Dom, people picture you as you are, which is a successful former global managing partner at McKinsey, author, systems leader, but you started out like them as students. So when you were young, did you realize that you were going to be in the arena, that you were going to have positions of leadership? Where did you think you were going to end up?
Well, first of all, Peter, let me thank you for. I wanted to leave after you did the introduction, because you'll see as I talk, it'll go downhill. But I also just to say congratulations to everyone here. I think you are in an amazing business school, and I say this openly. I try and encourage any of the McKinsey people in a group to come here, because I think this is a unique place where you're in a great business school, but also part of an amazing university as well. And I hope you really enjoy your time here, not only in the coursework, but just with the history and the range of things. So I'm also a bit jealous, actually, because I think it would be so much fun to be here. But I left here, I think I was 24 years old, and I thought I was going to be an academic, because I thought that was the pathway. But what I was worried about was I wanted to have an influence on the world. I hope it didn't sound arrogant, but I wanted to kind of distort the earth in some way. I wasn't quite sure how, but I didn't want to wait until I was 55 to do it. That's what really made me nervous. I wanted to be in a place where I could help get decisions made or make a difference. That was where, and I applied to many places. I applied to the World Bank while I was here, never even got a response from them. many different institutions. And but for me, it was like, where am I going to get some experience to sort of see what leaders do? All my work experience had been frontline work experience. I'd worked on a fishing trawler, a salmon boat. I helped build roads. I worked in a sawmill. So I didn't have CEO I didn't know. I'd never met a CEO in my life. I didn't know what they were like. And I thought, how do they make decisions? So I wanted to find a place where I could be able to start making a difference, but also learn. And this isn't, by the way, and I'm not trying to say go to McKinsey to do it. It's not. There's many organizations you can do this in. It's sort of your attitude to it. But that was sort of my feeling, a kind of a wanting to, not really knowing what I wanted to, where I could do it, but wanting to be able to make decisions. That was the.
But you stayed for your entire career in McKinsey.
Yeah.
Many people don't.
Yeah.
Why?
I originally thought I'd go for 2 years. I thought I'd go. It'd be almost like my postgraduate work. I would go because I'd get a sense of what I liked or didn't like. But for me, what I like two aspects in particular. One was just the variety. I love, the variety of issues and work. It's like being a kid in a candy store. It's just, you work in an oil company, a bank, a retailer, just all in different parts of the world. And so I always felt I was learning. And the second is the people. And I think there's many organizations like this, by the way. Again, it's not just McKinsey, other consulting firms and other organizations where you find people that are curious. They have a set of principles. It's not about greed. I mean, if you want to earn a lot of money, don't come to McKinsey. That's not the place. Go somewhere else to do it. But people want to make a difference, but there were probably 4 times where I almost left. Well, one would have almost been not my choice because I wasn't doing well, so I was in a sense. It's funny when I found headhunters started to call me. They seemed to know, I guess, that things weren't going well. But then there were other points where you're working closely with a client, and the client says, "Why don't you come and join?" And there were 3 occasions where it was very close to I thought I want it maybe this because people say, "Well, you're an advisor. You're not really doing. Should you?" What's the age at which you do it? So there were 4 occasions where I almost did go.
Okay. As one of your things that you did as managing partner was something that I thought was amazing, which is you vowed that you would talk to 2 CEOs a day. And why I know this, I'm not a CEO, but Dom actually counted me as one of those. So it was about 8 years ago. We were having lunch in a restaurant in Boston. And
4 Seasons.
4 Seasons. Yeah. He paid.
Yeah.
And you shared with me at that time some of the observations you were collecting around leaders, and now you've done that more systematically in the arena. And you have 5 lessons in the book, and I'd like to, since you guys don't yet have this, kind of walk through some of the major lessons out of the book, and I'll pepper Dom with some questions. So the first lesson in your book is find and invest in your people. And this seems so blindingly obvious. How is it that a CEO can lose the plot? Because saying you should find and invest in your people seems like 101, but we all forget, and that we includes me.
Yeah.
So how?
No, I think you'll find with all the 5, they're blindingly obvious as you go through it. But where that came from, actually, to your point, Peter, I did have this rule of seeing two CEOs or leaders is what they could be in the academic world, the business world, the public, government or social sector, and what I would ask is typically 2 sets of questions if I didn't know the person that well. One is, what would you teach your younger self if you could do it over again? What would you teach yourself? And the second is, what are the 3 issues that kind of excite you or worry you? What are you working on to try to understand the agenda? And what I heard consistently, and in the end, I think it's been about like 3,200 people over 9 years, was a very consistent message which was people. It said, I would have spent more time taking people out faster, like people that weren't performing in their role at senior levels. I would have moved them out if I took too long. I would have moved people up faster. I would have given people more of an opportunity than they weren't quite ready. I should have done it. And the third is I would have spent more time with people. So the people, no matter what the sector, no matter what the country, And I think what happens is we get obsessed with the financials or the short term, because that's easy to measure. I know how I'm doing but with people it's a little harder because it takes time to develop people and to assess people and move it. And yet it's one of the most fundamental things. It's also one of the hardest things, as we were talking this morning, giving feedback to people, trying to unleash people. It can be very, very energy draining. I've never met anyone who's enjoyed taking someone out of a role. And if they do, they probably shouldn't be in the role, right? But those are very difficult to do. One of the reasons why it's difficult to do this is actually loyalty, right? And I remember there was a business psychotherapist who came into this group of people that were going to become CEOs, and he said, I want to talk to you about the positive aspects of disloyalty. And we're going, is this some game? What trick is this? And basically what this fellow was saying was the hardest decisions you're going to make are moving people out that have helped you get to where you are, right? They're the people that have actually helped you be who you are. They're the people but actually they may not be able to do the role, right? And those are the most difficult, but you have to do that as a leader. And I've never forgotten that. As I said, also in our own firm, we have to take our own medicine. And there were people that helped me through my career who were in leadership roles that I had to ask to go. And literally the first question was, do you remember all the things I did for you, Dom? Why are you hurting? What's the deal? He said, because you're not right for this particular role.
Let's pick up on that, because in the book, one of your other points is set your agenda and act fast. When you took on the job, some of your colleagues advised you to, this is a quote, take it slow and not rush into any significant changes. You rejected their advice.
Yeah.
How did it feel to reject the advice of people who had mentored you over the years? This isn't the same as firing them, but, No,
it was hard because there are people, actually the two people, one was Ron Daniel, who's he's like my father in a way. I trust him to the end of the earth. And Ian Davis, who I have humongous amount, he's an amazing leader, very wise. But my feeling was that, it was wise advice in the sense of you better understand what your environment before you start shooting or doing things. Does make sense. The challenge is I felt we needed to make a lot of change in what we needed to do. And I think what I noticed again from CEOs I've met is they always wish they had more time. The saddest CEOs I met who were in the end of their tenure saying, I wished I'd moved faster. I wished I'd aimed higher. And there's nothing they can do. It is the saddest. And for me, and also, frankly, also spending time in Korea where you have some of the most ambitious CEOs in the world, like almost crazy ambitious. And that kind of I'd always have this image of what if Juntae Kim was in here? What would he do? He probably would I'd have to put a harness on him to keep up. So that was why, and I just felt the urgency and a lot of other people in the organization, to be fair, also felt, I think, the same way that those colleagues said, you're going too quickly. You're disrupting things. Do you have the credibility? Because the other issue is, I noticed this, when you get into a leadership role, you don't actually feel like you belong there. It's almost like someone's going to figure this out, that it's a mistake. That's what I was like. At some point, someone's going to say, oh my God, this guy really can't do it. So you're actually more nervous early. But I felt I had to try and counteract it.
So on the one hand, this monograph suggesting go fast. But then, on the other hand, you're on the board and have been one of the leaders in focusing capital in the long term, which is maybe not go slow, but it's hyperspeed over here and it's decades-long agendas over there. How do you reconcile moving fast with very long horizon agendas?
I think it's one of the things we all need to do in the world we're in, where you have to do both. I remember one person, it was Jim Flaherty, who was the Minister of Finance in Canada, and I asked him, what would you teach your younger self? And he said, just one thing. I wished I could put a microscope in one eye and a telescope in the other and not get a headache. And obviously he didn't do that, but it was the model was, because he said, I'm Minister of Finance. Things happen quickly. You know, the 2009. Yeah. You have to move very quickly. On the other hand, I'm, in a sense, a steward for the country over a 20-year period infrastructure. And I think the challenge is that this is my own belief. There are much better people here on the leadership side and the faculty. But I think people are generally one or the other. They're not typically good at both. You're really good at you can drive things for the short term or the long term. And so what I found is you have to use tools to do it. So making sure, this is where it gets to your time. What I would try and do for myself was basically say, I have every term I did as managing partner, I had a pyramid with my objectives of what I wanted to get done over the full 9 years if I was going to stay in it. And I looked at that every Sunday night. I literally would just read it and just remind myself of what we're trying to do. Mm-hmm. And then every day there was a 15-minute period to just look at, am I dealing with the issues that are going on? So you try and force in your calendar, if you will, that. And then there's periods in the year where it may be, and I would always have a offsite for 4 days in a remote place with just a group of people outside and inside McKinsey, just talk about long-term, if you will. So I think you have to force it, otherwise you get driven in it. One other I just learned it last week. There was a fellow at Cisco that said the way they do short-term, long-term was every day, the management team, now they happen to be in one location, which makes it easier, they get together from 2 o'clock to 2:15 with what they call a scrum master, who's a 27-year-old person, which I thought was interesting, who actually runs the meeting and the CEO says, we all stand up. He goes, I'm just one of the people, and we talk about workload, what are we doing, are we dealing with the issues? And then on Friday, for an hour, he leads the session where they talk about how are we doing, which I just thought was an interesting way, again, of getting that short, long. Yeah.
And as you reflected on the long-term horizon for consulting, you had some pretty clear ideas about what was happening. And in your third chapter, which is driving change with the right levers, you moved the firm pretty hard in some directions where it hadn't gone before. I guess 2 questions. One is, what do you see those big seismic shifts that changed the world of consulting from when you started to now?
Yeah.
And then I'll ask you about how you shifted McKinsey in your Berlin 6 speech.
Yeah. Well, first, I think everything comes to context. I think when you talk about leadership, it's leadership in context. Is it a turnaround? Is it a growth period? Is it volatility? So one of the things we did, which actually Ian Davis led it, and I benefited from it, was a big effort on kind of global forces. How's the world shifting? And that was in 2009. So I felt a very good backdrop. It was for our clients, but also for ourselves, that we were in the beginning phases of one of the most exciting periods that we're ever going to see. And that's why I said I'm jealous about you. You are all going to be leading in some of the most exciting times in history. And that you look at technology change, the shift of economic power to Asia and Africa, the aging world, the need for a new societal deal. Any one of those 4 things is dramatic. So what organization could possibly think they can do the same thing in that environment? And we were out there telling our clients, you've got to do it. But what I found is in McKinsey, we like to tell other people what to do, but we don't like to do it ourselves. We didn't want to look in the mirror. And probably the biggest, it gets back to your urgency thing, we did a firm strategy review in 1998. I was kind of involved peripherally. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that came from that was we surely have to adjust our advisory model from having a project manager plus 2 consultants and a partner. It seemed like every problem in the world required what we called an EM plus 2 for 3 months or 6 months. That literally was what came out of 1998 was we should move that model. There must be, maybe we should second people, or people just want a senior person, or they would just want junior people, whatever. 1998 to 2010, we went from 100% of our work being EM plus 2 for 3 months to 6 months to 99%. So we didn't move, right? We did. So this is a place that we can talk a lot, but we don't seem to like to do that. And that's where I felt we spent a lot of time talking to clients, and particularly non-clients and competitors. And we were very insular, arrogant, we know stuff. We don't. And you started to see that there was a lot of different work that was going on. CEOs were wanting different things. And so I felt we had to break some of our orthodoxies. What type of work do we do? How do we get paid? What type of people do we hire? What parts of the world are we involved in? What amount of risk? All the kind of orthodoxies that McKinsey has, except our values, we literally put on and let's challenge them, right? And that makes people very uncomfortable because it's kind of like, that's not my firm, I didn't join. And we basically then started this experimentation phase where we vote as a partnership. It's challenging because we have to vote on things, and we couldn't agree on where the bathroom was. Like it would be a 50-50 vote, right? And so in these things, some of them were quite controversial. But we said we're going to experiment. And what happened is it just opened up a new way of doing things, and it started to unlock change. That's where we were trying to go.
And you did all this in the face of crisis. For those of you who weren't watching carefully, about right before Dominic took over, his predecessor had been involved in a pretty ugly insider trading scandal, more than involved in.
Went to jail.
Went to jail. And that's the firm you inherited. So tell us a little bit about managing crisis.
Yeah. One thing I feel a bit embarrassed, because we should talk about other crises, which I don't think I managed so well. So even I would argue that I managed earlier crisis well and the later crisis not so well, to be honest. I'll talk about some of why I think that.
Please.
But it was existential, because it was actually a senior partner named Anil Kumar, and then the previous managing partner who was a phenomenal leader, Rajat Gupta, is still insider trading. That's kind of like trust is the core of what we do. So to do that was devastating. And I would argue the devastation was more internally than even externally, because people's pride was just like, we didn't know what is going on. And it was very rough, because it was, and also coming in new, as I said, I felt like, probably the worst conversation I had was actually not with clients, so that was tough, or with the media, which was very tough. It was actually with the retired senior partners. They were off their lids angry. And even though, in a sense, I didn't do it, I represented the firm. And I remember in a room like this, you could feel the anger. And that's when I just said, you know what? I feel like I've taken, I'm a teenager who's been given the keys to the car for the first time and drove it into the ditch, right? That's, and they said, yeah, that's what we think too. So that's what we had to, but that was I learned a lot on that, because actually client CEOs helped me a lot. This is where I learned, you need help from people a lot of people go through this stuff. And that's where I realized too, you go into the fire, if you will. I mentioned there's this famous saying from Napoleon, which I love, which he used to say to his generals, which is, go to where the gunfire is loudest. Like if you don't just go to where the action is. Most of our tendency is actually to retreat, hope it goes away, hope like it'll get sorted, time will figure it out. It doesn't work that way, and I think you got to just go right into it. And I'll come back to it later. I think one of the things I didn't do so well in later crises is, someone else will sort it out, or it'll go, it's not that bad, it's not, and I think you've just got to go full frontal into it.
So when you're going full frontal into that, there's another example that you give in the book when you were summoned to 10 Downing Street, and you stopped outside and thought about, can I really go in and deal with this? Where do you find the strength to deal with stuff? Because you have to summon it from somewhere. Where does it come from?
Well, that was 2009. I'll never forget. It was actually it was probably 2 weeks from this date. I remember, and Gordon Brown was the prime minister. I was living in Singapore, and I just moved. I'd been in the role for 4 months. We had that day I arrived in London. The FT had a picture of Anil Kumar in handcuffs. That was the front, and basically said, effectively, is this the end of McKinsey? Right? That was the. And I just been in the role, so I didn't, in the way it works, there's not like Ian, who's such a close friend, he's not there to kind of say, this is Dominic Barton, you're just, all of a sudden, you're there, and so that was going to be my first meeting with the Prime Minister and this business council, And I thought, boy, this isn't a great day to, join the council with a picture of a... And that's when I remember this, that I sat outside and it was raining, and finally the policeman came over and said, like, he wondered what I was up to, like, what are you doing? And I said, well, I'm not sure I want to go in. And he looked at me, and I just said, you know what? God damn it, this is your job. You just got to go. You got to go. Because I had all sorts of reasons why I wouldn't. And I went in, and the amazing thing is how warm. First of all, believe it or not everyone had read that. They weren't, like, it's you. When you have a crisis, you think that's all everyone else is thinking about, but actually they've got their own issues, even though this was front page picture. And then it was more other people telling me, like literally, one guy, I remember the Rio Tinto CEO, put his arm around me, Tom Albin, and he said, you think that's bad? Let me tell you a couple of stories. And I was like, whoa. So they were that. But I think those, one of the things I think is, this is where, like, I would call it resilience. And that's the time when I appreciated the failure periods I had, because I know I could, I've had setbacks and you can get through. I will have breakfast tomorrow morning. No matter what's going to happen, how bad this is, I'm going to have breakfast. I'm going to be able to see my wife. My kids will still be. I looked for many positive things that would say, at the end of the day, some things won't change. They'll still hopefully love me. And you have to sort of put that across. And I think that comes from experience and having gone through that type of stuff before. Yeah.
Fair. So I have a whole page of questions, but this is now your time, except I reserved the last one. Okay, so this is your turn. We have mics. Who's got the mics? Tiff, you've got a mic there? Okay. But right there, as soon as you get a mic.
The thing you discuss about going real fast, in scenarios and not waiting for some time to come, that is what I resonated with. I also happened to read Jack Welch's novel where he mentioned the same thing. And I was pretty much following that in my prior organization. Then I switched organizations, went to Vodafone. So I was working there. And there I found that people, it was not the way they work. They really did not take everything so slow. So so fast. So there, I think it was not appreciated that much. And I toned down my approach. Do you think that is how we should be, like, waiting as per the organization you're in? Or that approach has to be there in life?
Yeah, well, it's a great question. I think, again, it depends on the context of what's going on in the company. I think if you're for example, I'll give you a Ping On Insurance, which is a Chinese company that's doing phenomenally well, I would not urge anyone there to try and make that place go faster. It's just try and keep up, if you know what I mean. They're moving at a pace and so you have to understand that. I also think you don't always have to be moving quickly. You can be reflective. One of the most impressive CEOs I met is Vittorio Calao. And he's a deeply principled, he reads books I don't understand, and I know he does. Like he sent me one on time, like it's some Italian physicist talking about how I should do my physics better. Time in mountains goes faster than the time on the ground. But it was more a reflection on how we spend time, and yet he's one of the most performance-driven people. But you don't get that sense, I don't feel, when you're there. You know what I mean, in the place. So I think doesn't mean it's also style. You don't have to look like you're anxious and rushing around and driving stuff, and the meeting can only be 3 minutes. You can still have some urgency. But I wouldn't, as an individual, I think you should be ambitious about what to get into this school, if you're in this, you're a leader. Otherwise, you wouldn't be here. And I'm not trying to put pressure on you, but you have an amazing opportunity to kind of do so many things, and I would be quite demanding about that. Don't expect it to happen every week. Don't expect it to, happen in the way you like it to. But I think I would be ambitious about that.
Let's try 3 quick questions, and then we'll aggregate them, and then Dom can answer.
Okay, great idea. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, so 3 quick questions. Let's do the back. Where are the mics? How about that woman there, and this guy here, and that guy over there?
Thank you for a fantastic talk. And at the beginning of it, you said that the reason why you went into consulting is that you wanted to distort the world. And I guess it's like it drives me, it attracts me to consulting, and many more people here, I think. So do you still feel this like excitement, and do you feel that you are changing the world for good now after all these years?
Okay. Second question was back here.
So my question is, you've talked about sort of the softer skills, but I was wondering, how do you integrate the soft skills with today's very data-driven, analytics-driven world and view on business?
Okay. Right. Third question is here.
Hello. Hey, thank you, Dean Tufano, and so very good. So it's I think this is a bit of a personal question. So did the new Silk Route and Galleon debacle kind of change your opinion of Rajat Gupta and Anil Kumar? And if so, in a situation like that, how do you maintain professionalism even though someone that you respected kind of let you down to an extent? How do you kind of get over it or maintain professionalism? Yeah.
Great.
Okay.
So. Yeah, distorting the. I mean, I'm still very excited. I mean, by the way, I do think consulting is one profession where you can do it. I think there's a lot of organizations where you can drive it. To me, it's more about, is there a place where I can have access to decision making at a level where you can start to shift it, or I'm going to build up the capacity to do it. That's where. And for me, my problem right now is I get too excited by all the different things. I was mentioning to the dean that this is more a pro bono thing I think is with the Malala Fund, right? And the idea of trying to get 130 million girls to be in school past the age of 12, that's a pretty exciting, and there's a way you can have an influence to do that. By the way, you don't have to work for McKinsey to do, the people on that group but there's kind of a mission, which is that fires me up. And then there's so many issues like that to work on, that the problem is focus, if you will. That's my challenge, because there's so many interesting things to be done out there. So I'm still very excited by that. I think the soft skills that's a great question. One place I learned that actually was one of the times that I almost left McKinsey. Actually, GE, which GE doesn't get such a great name right now, given what's been going on over the last while and yesterday and so forth. But I still regard that organization as still one of the best leadership factories in the world, what they do to create leaders. I still, whatever's happened to that organization. Anyhow, when I was a project manager, I got a job offer from GE. I was in Toronto. I had to fly to Connecticut. I remember I was all nervous. I didn't tell anyone. I felt disloyal, but I wanted to see what this was like. And the fellow sat me down and I said, "Why did you ask me to come?" I was honestly a bit shocked. I said, "Why?" And I said, "Well, you're at McKinsey," and he literally laid out, he said, "I think there's a set of hard skills something about, and there's a set of soft skills." And he literally drew a graph. And I said, "Well, what are some of the hard skills?" He goes, "I think you know how to take cost out of an organization. You know how to develop a marketing plan. You know how to write a financial statement." He just went through all these, and I kept going, nope. And then he said, soft skills. He said, soft skills, you know how to influence someone without having power. You can give someone negative feedback and inspire them. I was going, nope. But there was clearly, I think you need both. And I've always found that, and as a result, actually in that meeting, I said, you got the wrong person, because I'm not ready for this, and I went back. But I've never forgotten that model, and I think you have to have both. It's in balance. You can't have hard skills without soft skills. And I actually think in McKinsey, we've focused too much on assessing the hard skills by that, because the antecedents of hard skills are GPA, what school did you go to? I actually think when I look at people that are able to have a lot of influence in organizations, it's the soft skills of how they operate, how they influence people, where they're coming from. So I think both are critical. And on the professionalism, that experience with Galleon and so forth, what I would say is it's a civil relationship with Rajat, because I respected him, and I do, for what he built. He built a phenomenal thing, but it's also very difficult to have more intimate discussion because of what actually what happened. So I don't honestly think I have dealt with that. It'll take probably a couple of generations to be. That doesn't mean, by the way, one shouldn't forgive people. I think you should. You know what I mean? I don't, but I'm just saying emotionally, I still find it difficult. You know what I mean? So it's, those are very personal. So it's in a sense having respect, but I don't really want to spend a lot of time. You know what I mean?
Let's try 3 quick questions, and then I get my last one because you have to get back to class. So let's see. Are there people at the back? Because I feel that I've let you down a little bit.
You're meeting a world leader. You're a chief executive. You need the consultancy, the project very badly. This world leader, for reasons which we need not go into, he insults you if you're a man. Or he makes a cheap pass if you're a woman. This man might be President Trump. The option to smile and go on as nothing has happened is not on. What would you do, or how would you advise a young executive man or young lady to react?
Okay. Where was 2? There you are, 2, please. Don.
Okay. My question is on that you said when we invest in people, it takes time. And when that's become your vision of your organization, how you make sure that that cascade down to all leadership in all levels, and how you ensure that people who comes up to leadership really want to improve their own team or own people.
Right.
Okay. And then number 3 was the gentleman right there.
Mr. Barton, at a certain point in your McKinsey career, you said that you're going to set your own bar and it's going to be higher than theirs. That's before you made partner. How exactly did you go about doing that?
Okay, excellent question. So, on dealing with, a government leader or world leader who's rude or inappropriate and so forth, I don't think you sort of kowtow, but I also don't think you punch them in the head type of a reaction, right? And I think I talk about one case where I think I handled it badly. There was a minister in Thailand. He was actually the deputy minister, who was a very extremely arrogant guy. He actually was a he'd been trained as a doctor in the UK in the NHS. Very plumb British accent, and he was which is nothing wrong with that. But he was explaining to me how he didn't need to do this, and he got called in, and this was a real pain. And he went on. He was talking about himself all the time, and the purpose for the meeting was he wanted us to do a pro bono engagement on the education system, which I was excited about, right? But he went on about himself, and I was tired. I'd flown in that day. I'd come in from New York. And then he proceeded, the second part of the conversation was how McKinsey had done some work in Thailand 20 years ago that completely screwed up. It was a disaster, and he said, you guys couldn't even screw a light bulb in if I showed you, like that. And at that point I lost it, and I could tell my colleague started punching me in the leg because he knows when I lose it. And he was like, just calm. And I said, can I interrupt the conversation? And his chief of staff looked, and I said, I have a question for you. How well do you think this conversation's going? And he looked at me and he goes, well, I think it's going pretty well. And I said, well, let me give you my version of the answer. I think it's a disaster. And I said, I have zero interest in wanting to do this pro bono. You have the worst way of getting people excited. And I just don't have any time for this. I said, bullshit. At which point, my colleague stopped punching me and was trying to cover me. And I have to tell you, I felt really good for about 15 minutes. I was like, God damn it. And then about 2 hours afterwards, I felt really bad. Because this person, they're going, I met the most arrogant son of a bitch from McKinsey you can imagine. Came in here and, said all this, you know what I mean? It hurt. So I think I should have confronted him, but I didn't need to do it with the emotion. And that's where I think you have to push back, but do it in a way you would like to have it done to you. But I think it's important to do it. and to be who you are. And just remember, how are you going to feel afterwards? Because, by the way, if you don't say something, I think you also can feel badly, right? And those, unfortunately, those happen a fair bit. On investing in people, it's a great point, because if you only do it and no one else does it, it's not going to be a very healthy organization. But what I found in many organizations that are kind of people first, where they drive it, you see it very much in the selection process for leaders. Like if there isn't an upward feedback process, and like an inspirational survey, and even in McKinsey we do that, we're very people-oriented. You'd be shocked at some of our senior partners when you do the review. I'll never forget one person. He came to me and he said, "Dom, you obviously don't like me." I was like, "Okay, what?" And he said, "I'm my colleague. We do work together. You put him on a personnel committee. I don't go on a personnel committee. He became the leader of a practice. I'm not the leader of a practice. Like in other words, you're making him a leader, but you're not making me a leader." And I said to him, Stefan, I said, "What do you think your upward feedback scores are like?" And he said, "Let's talk about it." And I said, "What do you think the average positive number of messages that people get at your level?" He goes, "I don't know." I said, "Take a guess. How many do you think?" He said, 30. I said, "It's about 35. I said, "How many do you have?" He says, "I don't know, probably 20. I said, "You have 3. So you are the problem, not me. That's why I'm not, you don't." And that was so if you aren't someone who actually builds people, then you shouldn't put them in roles. And then I think it's about how people are evaluated to make sure that that's the case. But I think the biggest one is selecting people that actually fit it. There's nothing more disorienting for saying one thing and then you pick people that are not believing in that, right, in the system. So that the setting my own bar, that probably was from frustration, because I think I finally realized after 8 years, and if there's one tip I would say to you guys, which I wish I'd learned earlier, I was very much what I call a box ticker and a hoop jumper. Like, okay, what do I need to do to get an A? Okay, you do this and that. Yep, I can do that pretty, like what? So in McKinsey, what do I need to do to become a project manager? Oh, you should work on 2 projects, you get your feedback, you do this. What does it take to become a senior project manager? Do this and that. What does it become to be a part? So I followed, I was a follower is what as I was going through it. And then the shocking thing for me was when I didn't get elected, and it took the longest time it takes for anyone to get elected. And I had setbacks, but not sort of like in school or when it was the core focus. So this was a real shock to me, and it really hurt me badly, because you lose your self-confidence. I remember my father-in-law at the telling me, he said, "You know what, Dom, I don't. Maybe business is not for you. Maybe you're not good at this." I was like, "Wow, that's," and I remember the other point was giving a colleague who joined me 2 years after I joined. He was one of my best friends, was elected before me, and he wanted me to give the celebration speech. I'll never forget that, because I'm there, and you know what's going through everyone's mind. They're going, "God, this is embarrassing. Like, this guy didn't get elected, and he's the one." Like, I felt like almost everyone was looking, and the conversation was about me, not the guy we were trying to celebrate. Anyhow, so I found that very shocking to the system, and what it made me really realize is, like, what am I trying to do in the world? And when I was here and I wanted to change, I want to change the world, I want to make a difference, or do I want to meet people's checklists? And then I said, screw it, I have a pretty big ambition in terms of what I'd like to do in the world. I'm going to set it up, and if McKinsey's a vehicle for doing it, then that's good. If not, I don't really care. I'm going to go do something else. And that's what I meant by that. I had to set my own standard as opposed to following all the time what I thought, and it took me too long to realize that. So I think you have to have your own set of standards.
And I think that is a great way to end. Now, at the end of your lectures, sometimes, I'm going to give you a little hint. Your instructors love it when you show that you're grateful. So let's show that we're tremendously grateful for Dominic to be here today.
Thank you. Thank you.